may be seated. Won't you pray with me? God, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for the beauty that comes with being your followers. But God, we also sometimes need a little push in the right direction. And so we're grateful for that too. God, we ask that the meditation of my lips and of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, our rock and our redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
A couple weeks ago, my dad and mom came down to visit. Pedro and I were celebrating our collective 30th birthday. I turned 30 in April, and Pedro turned 30 in June. And so somewhere in the middle, we had a birthday barbecue, and my parents came to help and celebrate. And that also happened to be the same week that Elba had her MRI. So my dad came a day early to hang out with Lydia while Pedro and I took care of the needs of Elba. With him, my dad brought 3 or 4 quarts of you-pick strawberries. And let me tell you, they were the best strawberries I have ever tasted in my entire life. And I want to tell you, it's because they were fresh, right? They came right off of the strawberry bush that my dad had picked them and brought them down, and they didn't sit for too long. He picked them on Tuesday, he came to our house on Wednesday, we ate them Wednesday night, right? It's a process of, these are really good because of when we ate them. But if you know anything about fresh fruit or gardening or fruit in general, if they had sat for even 2 or 3 more days, they would have been the worst strawberries I had ever smelled or seen. Right? I wouldn't have even wanted to eat them because they would have looked terrible. Cece said to me this morning, this reading is a little hard. It's a doom and gloom type reading. And I said to her, I know. It is what it is. And it's interesting that she said that to me as we were preparing to get into worship, because she's also the one who brought up a little bit of discomfort with the prophets, with this idea of a prophet, with this idea of prophecies, right? Because when we hear the word prophet, oftentimes as Christians, and Cece is not alone in this, so I'm calling her out simply because she's the one who said it, not because she needs to adjust in any way, right? We as Christians have a terrible pattern of only talking about the prophets in this dark sense. In this sense of, woe is the land of Israel. Woe is the follower of God. Woe is. But my hope is that by the end of the summer, by the end of our series on prophets, you have a deeper understanding of what it means to be a prophet of God. That each of us have the opportunity to see and say and tell about what we know from God. This morning's reading is a hard reading. God and Amos are in the middle of a discussion when we enter into the picture. And God uses a visual to help get the message across. Knowing Amos was a bit of a farmer himself, God brings this narrative in a way that Amos could thoroughly understand it. And honestly, as somebody who has purchased fruit in my lifetime, it is also a way that I can understand it, and I would not fancy myself a farmer. God brings this narrative and says, what do you see? Amos mentioned a fruit basket, and then possibly all of the enjoyable things that come with a fruit basket, right? The fruit is fresh and looks juicy and is luscious and so good to eat. But God doesn't just see the good things, the lush, the juicy, the bright, vibrant colors. God saw fruit that was on its way to being rotten. This fruit didn't have long before it began to be no good. And in his conversation with Amos, God says, this scenario is like the people of Israel. God is receiving what the people are giving. God sees the injustice. God sees the oppression. God sees the inequality. And God sees the economic injustice. And God unfolds for Amos the plan of judgment. This is not a God we often encounter in the newspaper or in the media today. Today, God is being thrown in the middle of political wars, religious rivalries, and philosophical theories. God always rises a prophet to represent God's refusal to go along with the oppressive behavior. In Amos, we are able to refute any argument that God is not a God of the oppressed. But I want to think about Amos himself for just a minute. Amos is a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore trees, which we talked about last week really just means that he takes care of the sycamore trees. He's not seminary trained. He's not a priest. He does not come from a long line of prophets before him. He has not been commissioned or ordained. Amos does not have a license to preach. But he does have an enormous job. His job is to give a message that people really don't want to hear. And if you did, as I suggested last week, and looked through the book of Amos, you'll see that most of the messages that Amos has to give are ones that nobody wants to hear. And quite frankly, these messages were the kind of messages that could have gotten him killed. Friends, this is a hard reading. We read it and we see all of the things that are our worst nightmare. We see that Israel is treating the least and the lost among them with the least amount of love and respect. And we hear God say, you know, the time is coming where I'm going to take care of this. Because it's not okay. And it's easy for us to hear a God of punishment in that. It's easy for us to hear God wanting it to be a particular way, and that's the only way that's possible, and there's no room for error. But friends, I want you to think about it a little differently this morning. What if God speaking to the Israelites through Amos is an opportunity for self-correction? An opportunity for self-correction. Pedro and I are in a very interesting stage of our parenting because Elba is 3.5 and lets you know every day just how much of a 3.5-year-old she is. And Lydia, even though she's only 1.5, thinks that her sister is the best thing since sliced bread and wants to do everything that her sister does. So if Elba does something that we think is not necessarily the best for her, Elba might stop doing that thing, but Lydia has seen that it's a thing that she can do. And so we find ourselves correcting them in a way that is gentle and helpful. And so in this stage of my life, as I read that passage, this passage, and as I hear this passage, I think about what if God is trying to gently correct. And I know, bear with me, right? Because it's not gentle at all. God is kind of nasty in this moment. But what if God is saying to the Israelites, you are about to hurt yourself or hurt that table? Right? The big thing that we deal with Elba and Lydia is that they climb up on tables and stuff that they're not supposed to be on. And so the self-correction is, all right, get off the table, please. Get off the table, please, so you don't hurt yourself. Get off the table, please, so that you don't break the table. Right? What if God is saying to the Israelites, do better, or you'll be ruined? And it's not a punishment, right? It is an opportunity for the Israelites to hear this and do better. Pedro was sharing his illustration of this with me as he walked out the door this morning, and he said, if I saw somebody that I didn't like about to step into dog poop, I would probably just let them step into the dog poop, because it doesn't really bother me if somebody I don't like has dog poop on their shoe. I, as somebody who really cares about people in general, heard that and I was like, I would probably tell them about the dog poop anyways, but that's not the point. The point is, if somebody that I like was about to step in the dog poop, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to make as much noise as I can to point out the dog poop that they're about to step in. Right? What if God is saying to the Israelites, you're about to step in dog poop? And giving them an opportunity to fix their path. What if Amos's message, as hard as it is to hear, is an opportunity for self-correction? Friends, I pray that you have the opportunity to either share with others moments of self-correction, or that you are willing to hear others calling you into self-correction. It's not always easy, right? It feels like an attack. But what if God has called this person into your life so that you don't step in the dark? It's a silly little example, but I'm sure you'll be thinking about it for the rest of the week, right? Friends, may you have voices to say and ears to hear the words that God is speaking to you and through you this week. May it be so. Amen.